Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Krishnam Chatat Prabhavajna Asinam Jagadishwaram Hriddhistam Pujayamasa Mayaya Partha Vigraham. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shashwin. We can now do the Manglacharan and then we'll hand over to Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadanti Shvapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Utapadagamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sthya Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvedam Svavadudam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Scha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Kopisha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapte Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanjakalpatarubhyascha Kirpa Sindhubhayeva cha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gauravakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Shashwin, for the recital of the Manglacharan and the verse. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We now hand over to you. We are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, which is the passing away of Bhishma Dev. And today we are on text 10, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today, and wishing you all lots of wealth, health, prosperity, and most importantly, spiritual progress for the year ahead following Diwali. So, as Shashwin Prabhu has nicely recited, Krishnam Jatat Pravagagnya Ashinam Jagadishwaram Hidishtam Pujayamasha Maya Yopata Vigraham. Translation: Lord Shri Krishna is situated in everyone's heart, yet he manifests his transcendental form by his internal potency. This very Lord was sitting before Bhishma Dev, and since Bhishma Dev knew of his glories, he worshipped him duly. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord's omnipotency is displayed by his simultaneous presence in every place. He is present always in his eternal abode, Golok Vrindavan, and still he is present in everyone's heart, and even within every invisible atom. When he manifests his transcendental form in the material world, he does so by his internal potency. The external potency or the material energy has nothing to do with his eternal form. All these truths were known to Sri Bhishmadev, who worshipped him accordingly. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vaishnavutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatta Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, everyone. So thank you so much for joining today to discuss this wonderful verse, but also this wonderful chapter and a wonderful personality in Bhishma Dev. So this is a really one of, there's so many amazing characters, so many amazing devotees within the Srimad Bhagavatam. I have to say one of my favorites up there, top 5, Bhishma Dev. He's just such an amazing character, such an amazing devotee, and much to learn from him and his teachings. And so I wanted to just explore a little bit of this today with reference to today's verse. And I usually write a theme for each verse. I think, okay, what kind of stands out in the verse? And here I would say Krishna is in the heart. So bearing that in mind, I was thinking about this and thinking, okay, what some things I could speak to with regards to Krishna being in the heart, which Bhishma Dev was very aware of. And this title of this chapter is called The Passing Away of Bhishma Dev. So this is Bhishma Dev's death. So with his that word death being in mind, I thought, okay, we'll focus on that word death, and break it into an acronym. I like my acronyms. So D is Bhishma Dev was very connected to his dharma. So that's going to be the first one, dharma, in the context of Sri Bhishma Dev. And then E is when you're practicing Krishna consciousness, just like Bhishma Dev, expect to be misunderstood. E is expect to be misunderstood. And I want to talk a little bit about this as well. And then AT is avoid temptation. So I want to talk a little bit about how Bhishma Dev, he was subject to so many temptations, so many easy ways out, but he stuck to his vow, he stuck to his dharma, and ultimately at his death he was able to be successful. And then finally H is heart. So Krishna is in the heart, and how we can be cognizant of this fact, just as Bhishma Dev was in this verse. It's mentioned that Bhishma Dev knew of his glories, and he knew that Krishna was seated within his heart as well as appearing before him, and how we can become cognizant of this in the context of the teachings of Bhishma Dev. So the first point, when we're talking about death, and the death of Bhishma Dev, is this concept of dharma. So in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is actually saying to Arjun in the 31st verse, he's saying Arjun is considering not fighting and so forth. And Krishna is saying to Arjun, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know there's no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. So there's no need for hesitation. Now this in the purport is a wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada, because he says in the purport there are two kinds of swadharma. This word swadharma. So this is specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with his in accordance with religious principles in order to leave liberation. When one is liberated, one's svadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. So on the bodily plane, Svadharma is called Varnashram Dharma, or a man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashram Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. So what does it mean, and why am I talking about Svadharma, and what's that got to do with Krishna in the heart? Well, a long time ago, probably I'd say 2015, 2016, I was in a class with it was called An Interview with the Sadhu. And he definitely was a very, very saintly personality, His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj. And he was visiting the UK. He's originally from India. And I asked, I was new then, and I was given an opportunity to ask him a question. And at the time, as I am now, I was still then working in IT, and I was very dissatisfied and with my career. And I was reading the Gita at the time, and I said to Maharaj, I said, Maharaj, this in the Gita, there's this concept of dharma, swadharma, and Arjun had Krishna right there to tell him what to do, but we don't necessarily always have Krishna. We don't have the luxury of having Krishna right there to tell us what to do. So I work in IT, and I definitely don't, I don't really like it, don't feel attached to it, don't feel it's my dharma. What should I do? And Maharaj, he said, well, actually, and as explained here nicely in the purport by Prabhupada also, is that everyone has their two duties, two dharmas. As a human being, you have your spiritual dharma, and then you have specific material duties within a concept of dharma. So one specific spiritual duty that is for every human being is to connect with the Lord. So practicing our practice of spirituality, practice of connecting to God, of Krishna consciousness, is a duty of all living entities. And if you're not doing that, as we've discussed many, many times, you'll always feel a bit of dissatisfaction, disconnection. But a very nice point to mention within here is that where we can follow or try and identify our own varna. So Prabhupada says in this purport of the Bhagavad Gita, he mentions the word varnashram. So one is be situated in the right ashram, and so we know there are four ashrams in the varnashram system. Can anyone tell me what the first I'll refer to the second word first. What are the four ashrams?
Brahmacharya.
Brahmachari, that's the first one. Thank you very much. Grahastha, yes.
Vanaprastha.
Vanaprastha, retired life, yes.
Sannyas.
Sannyas, thank you very much. Yeah, so these are the first part of that, four ashrams. So it's important to be situated in the right ashram. I'm looking on the call, can't see any brahmacharis on the call. So I think, well, technically Shashim probably he's in student life, so that's good. But we're all in the right ashram in the sense that if we're not situated in the right ashram, then it can be difficult, So if someone is very, they're very rare these days in Kali, but certain personalities, they have a very kind of detached kind of nature, and they may be better as a Naishtika Brahmachari, which incidentally Bhishmadev was what's known as a Naishtika Brahmachari. That means lifelong Brahmachari. Usually, typically in the Vedic system, people would all become brahmacharis from 5 to 25. And then at age 25, they would have a guru within the ashram. And the guru is very, very intelligent, and he can see, okay, this person, most people would get married. So you can say, okay, this person, he's probably better off getting married. Has this tendency. But then very few select people would be become Naishtika brahmacharis. So why am I mentioning this is because that being in the right ashram acts as a platform to advance in Krishna consciousness. And if we're not, so if we're kind of, not well situated in ashram, we're in the wrong ashram, or we're unmarried. I know for myself, after I left the ashram, for some time a bit older, I was unmarried, but not in the temple ashram either. And that's causes instability in the mind because you're not well situated, you're not feeling secure. So that's the first part. The second part is Varna. So the 4 Varnas, as anyone like to go through those?
Kshatriya,
Kshatriya.
Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra.
Yes, thank you very much, Mataji. Yeah, so we have Shudra, which is the kind of laborers, or but this Sudra is actually very broad. It even includes like artists and things like that, artisans. That's still considered Sudra. Then we have Vaishya, who are kind of a businessmen in the modern world, as you could say. Then we have Kshatriya. So these are like the leaders, administrators, and then we have Brahmins, who are teachers, and Brahmins don't really care about money so much. So caveat here, and you've probably heard Prabhupada say many times, that in Kali Yuga everyone's kind of Sudra. So it's all mixed. There's no like pure Brahmins, no pure Kshatriyas, no pure Vaishyas, and everyone's kind of a bit muddled. However, being well situated in one's Varna is a platform to help us advance in Krishna consciousness. So if someone has got a lot of, for example, Brahmin tendencies, so they like teaching, the tendency, if you look at them and you just watch what they do from when they're a child, and they tend to have their head in a book all the time, and then suddenly they try and become, through modern society, they end up becoming, I don't know, a laborer or an accountant. This not being well situated in one Varna, how is that? A question to any of you. Anyone have any thoughts on this? Why is this detrimental to advancing in Krishna consciousness if one is not well situated in one's Varna?
Prabhuji, may I try?
Yes, please, Maji.
So they will always be unsatisfied in their position because it is not according to their nature. So they will be always dissatisfied.
Yes. Thank you so much, Maji. Yes. So the dissatisfaction is there. Ultimately, we can't find much rasa even in material occupation. But a very, very important point Mataji made is dissatisfaction, but also if you're not doing what Krishna consciousness, I think we all agree, to become a pure devotee it's not easy. It's not easy to practice Krishna consciousness at a high level and achieve love of Godhead. If it was, there's a saying which I quite like, is if it comes something like, if it comes easy, if it's comes easy, then it's cheap, and if it's something like that. Anyway, you get the drift of it. It evades my mind for the moment, but basically things which, that's it, if it's worth having, it won't be easy, and something like that. Anyway, so it's things which are easily attained are, they tend to not be of much value, but some things which are very, very valuable tend to be more difficult to attain. Now, what to speak of Krishna consciousness, which is the highest goal, which is becoming fully cognizant of God. So this relating to Varna is, if one is inclined to read books and teach and ends up being an accountant and processing numbers and has to worry about money all the time when they're not that way inclined, they will use a lot of mental energy, which could have been used practicing Krishna consciousness and connecting with the Lord and going deeper within the chanting, within the Shastras, and just uplifting themselves and becoming even what you could call a better person in the context of the Shastra. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to change oneself. As you can see, probably I want you to think about people in your relationships and your work colleagues or whoever. And sometimes you think, oh, I wish they would change, you know, but then we look at ourselves and think it's hard to change, right? It takes a lot of energy. So if we're in the wrong Varna, all our energy goes into that, and then we can't advance. So this is an important point here. And Bhishma Dev was well situated as a ruling class. He was an amazing leader. He was an amazing warrior, and he was well situated within, you could say Varnashram, but in those days, more like Varnashram is, so his Dharma, you could say. So this is the point of connect to your Dharma. And a while ago, I wrote a little poem actually in relation to finding your Varna. I hope you don't mind me sharing. It's very, very short. So it's just a few lines. I'm just trying to find it here, and I will I'll recite it for you. I hope you don't mind. So I've used this, and this kind of I've called this poem Purpose. So, who and what drains you of life, makes you tired and weak, takes away your enthusiasm and the will to speak? What fills your cup up right to the brim? After engaging in such activities, energy bubbles over from within. Think about such things as you go day to day. Then your life's purpose will soon become clear, even if unclear right now, your path to take. So I just wrote this poem as I was thinking about, as we go day to day, we observe it. We constantly want to be an observer of the self. And in the context even of Krishna consciousness, initially, until we become pure devotees, it's important to engage in services which make us feel energized. So as we've discussed, you know, sometimes some people, they can chant and they just feel so connected. So do more of that. Obviously, it's good to do the other non-devotional service, but do more of that if that really energizes you. Some people, they love listening to lectures of a particular personality, and that just really, they're just overflowing with energy. So do that more. Some people, they like doing particular services, and when they come back, they just feel energized. And I want you all to think about, and this is really on a note to self, that whether it's certain particular personalities or whether it's certain activities, we need to engage in activities which really make us enthused, because we need as much energy as we can to advance in Krishna consciousness. So I think I've hammered this point quite a lot of Varna and Dharma. So we'll move on to the next one, which is expect to be misunderstood. So His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj gave a wonderful class, and he actually compared Bhishma Dev to another great devotee. So there's a devotee in the 12th chapter of in the 12th chapter of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He's actually a demon, Vritrasura, but he's a great devotee of the Lord. And Vritrasura, he is, despite being a demon, he's engaged in a fight with the Devas, even though he's a devotee of the Lord, and he's causing a drought. So he's being killed by, he's in a fight with Lord Indra. And initially he's overpowering Indra, but at the same time, he's also preaching to him. And a lot of the demons who are fighting against the Devas have kind of ran away in fear, because the Devtas were very powerful. But he's, being a devotee of the Lord, he's not attached to the result. He's just fighting because that's his dharma, that's his duty. And so he's quite a misunderstood character, Vritrasura, because even though he's a demon and he's eventually killed by Lord Indra, he actually attained the abode of the Lord. So in the same way, we look at Bhishma Dev's life, and in one sense, he's kind of misunderstood because, okay, you could say he's a devotee, he's a devotee of Krishna. Why is he not fighting on the side of the Pandavas and on the side of Krishna? He's fighting on the side of the Kauravas. The second thing is, Bhishma Dev, he had to go through so much suffering because one, he was suffering to see the pious Pandavas he was very fond of go through so much difficulties. So then also he was on the side of the impious Kauravas. So that must have been kind of hurtful to Bhishma as well. However, he followed this path of dharma, and ultimately his intentions were pure. So on the battlefield, he was shooting at Krishna, and then it took me a long time to understand this. Like really, I knew on a logical level, but he's a devotee of Krishna, but he's shooting Krishna with arrows. And literally, Krishna is pierced by some of Bhishma Dev's arrows. And I was thinking, how is this possible? Well, actually, because another, does anyone know the other name of Bhishma Dev? Before he became Bhishma, he was known as?
Devadra.
Thank you very much, Mataji. Yes. So this comprises of two words, Deva and Vrata. So Vrata means vow and Deva means God or godly. So and there's many words associated, kind of how you could explain the meaning of this, but ultimately he had made a vow to protect the throne and to never have children and never be married, despite the fact that he was the rightful heir to the throne, because he'd sacrificed, for his father Shantanu's happiness. And and we'll talk about that at the next point, a bit of his backstory. So he was actually doing the right thing, and his intention when he was firing arrows at Krishna was, in his mind, he was actually, even though he was following dharma, so he was fighting against Krishna, fighting against the Pandavas, and he's fulfilling his duty and his dharma. However, in his mind, he was actually throwing petals. We did at our house, we did a ceremony on over the weekend, the Graha Pravesh, to bless our home. And we have deities in the house, so the priest encouraged us to bring the deities to the yagna, and we prepared many flower petals. So we're plucking lots of flower petals, and we're showering the deities with flower petals. And in the same way, Bhishma Dev, by firing arrows, his intention was actually just shout. He knows that he can't kill Krishna because he's a devotee. He understands. So in his mind, he's actually doing this as an offering to Krishna. It took me a long time really to understand that, but ultimately this was his intention. Expect to be misunderstood. If we look at the lives of devotees throughout the Shastras, and even sometimes we can look at our own lives, we can see that we don't necessarily feel understood. I'd like to refer to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was the spiritual master of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and an amazing devotee. However, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj would actually say that to devotees, he would say, take initiation from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, but don't associate with him because he's too advanced and you won't understand him. And on one instance, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, he was on his walks, and he saw a woman carrying a basket of fish, and then later that night he thought of fish, and he became angry at his deities. He had deities, and he said, how could you even let me think of fish and not think of you? And he tied a rope to his deities and threw them in the river. And now for us, we cannot fathom the mind of a pure devotee like Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He had such an intimate relationship. So we could say, okay, this is, devotees are misunderstood. But even a couple of other points in relation to this is there's a dear friend of mine. He's left his body now. You may have heard of him. He was my first mentor in Krishna consciousness. His name was Janakinath Prabhu, and he was a Naishtika Brahmachari at the manor. And he left his body a couple of years ago due to cancer. And a friend of mine was telling me a conversation he had with Janakinath, and he said he was living with this other devotee. He was a priest as well, Brahmin, but the devotee he was living with, his schedule was all over the place. Like he would get up at irregular times, and seemed to chant here and there. Sometimes would get up at like 7, do worship, then do other things, and then chant, and up and down. Some days he would get up early. He was very up and down like this. And this devotee was kind of laughing at him and criticizing him to Janakinath Prabhu. And Janakinath Prabhu said, looks very upset. And he said, but he's a Vaishnava. How can you, criticize his practice? And it's so important to realize that we may look at people or other devotees, and or rather than looking at them and other people first, it's said that when you point at someone, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. So first, look at our own practice and our own behavior. And ultimately, as practitioners of Krishna consciousness in this day and age, we're going to be misunderstood. Why we live in a village here, quiet village, very nice people here, to be fair, very, very nice, and it's somewhat mode of goodness. However, my wife sometimes will go on a japa walk, and she'll be chanting there with her bead bag, and she'll come back and say, she'll say, so many people look at me funny, and they're wondering what I'm doing with my hand in this bag. And I remember actually when I was, again, relating to how we did the ceremony, the priest asked me, he said, Prabhu, I'm going to do a swastika on the front of your door. Is this okay? And I said, yes, probably should be okay. But I remember the time when I was only about 10, 11 years old. And I had no idea about Nazi Germany. And for those of you who don't know, that Hitler, who was a horrible man, killed many people, he adopted the swastika as a sign for Nazis. I didn't know anything about this. And as a 10, 11-year-old boy, in art class once, we were told to do Indian art. So I started drawing swastikas on this poster and painting them. At which point the teacher took me to the side and said, Kamal, that's not a very nice sign you're doing. And I explained to it, this is India sign. This is, actually a Vedic sign. Swasti actually means, it's got many meanings, but it can mean all peace, it can mean good, very good, that which is good, that which brings good, that which brings prosperity. But yeah, like this, people will misunderstand. And if they see a big swastika pointed on the outside of your door, they'll probably, especially in the UK, they'll probably relate that more to Nazi Germany, even though that's relatively new, but the swastika is thousands of years old. So we can be misunderstood, but it's important to align our intentions. And Bhishma Dev, despite fighting on the side of the Kauravas, his intentions were pure. Have another kind of, I like to churn things a little bit, but sometimes we have the right intention in life, but what if we cause hurt to other people, or hurt to devotees, or we do things wrong, but it's unintentional? What should we do in that circumstance? So I was thinking about this, and I was reading something from, we've been graced by a couple of disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And I was reading something about an excerpt from one of his books. And this is another point, which is that even though our intentions may be pure, it's so, so important in Krishna consciousness. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj says, to evaluate yourselves more efficiently, we advise you to solicit feedback about yourself from those who know you well. Approach them with a pen and notebook in hand. When you are listening to their responses, write them down without comment or reaction. Then review them carefully later. In this way, you will be sure to remember the suggestions accurately without the distortions and rationalizations caused by false ego, self-delusion, or wishful thinking. You will not be so tempted to justify yourself or to dismiss what other people are saying. And I thought this was so wonderful because although we may not be doing things intentionally, and Bhishmadev, he, his intentions were pure and he was following Dharma though. And let's not kind of misunderstand here. Bhishmadev is a pure devotee and he was extremely well learned and extremely well educated. He had actually taken, after his birth, he was taken away sometimes for education under celestial beings. So he was very open to being corrected and feedback. And so even we're unintentionally perhaps, but we're still causing many, many offenses to our family, to devotees, or making offenses during our service. And we should be constantly open to that feedback. And I know for myself, it was a reflection that often when someone close to me would give me feedback, I could feel my tendency was to start saying things about them. And slowly I've worked on it and I try and just kind of bite my tongue and follow these instructions from Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, just take it on board, sit with those feelings of the false ego coming to the brim. And that way I can slowly then look at their feedback later on and see how I can improve. But ultimately, we are going to be misunderstood as devotees. And sometimes we try our best, we'll take this feedback on board, we try again, and we're still going to upset some people. And then once we've tried our best and we're still doing things wrong, and we've been open to feedback, we're still going to make mistakes, that we just have to follow our dharma. And dharma is ultimately described like a compass, which is going to lead us in the right direction back to Godhead. So we've talked about D, connect to your dharma. E, expect to be misunderstood as Bhishmadev was. And AT, avoid temptation. So Bhishmadev, as Kirtik Mataji has nicely said, was also known as Devarat. So this is one who keeps to his vow. And he sacrificed his own pleasure or his own happiness for his father's happiness. So a bit of his backstory was that his father was Maharaj Shantanu, and so Bhishmadev was born of Ganga Devi, who his father fell in love with, and then after that, though, his father fell in love with a beautiful lady by the name of Satyavati. But Satyavati would not marry Maharaj Shantanu unless her sons would ascend the throne, and the father in particular was very adamant that he'd only give her away if her sons would ascend the throne. So Maharaj Shantanu was in a predicament even, because Bhishmadev was the rightful heir to the throne. But Bhishmadev, being such a selfless soul, sacrificing for his father's happiness, sometimes you may question, okay, I mean, this is part of the Leela also, but you think, this isn't fair, is it really, on Bhishmadev? He would have made an amazing king, amazing leader, but I think it was also there part of the Leela to demonstrate such amazing qualities of sacrifice, that he sacrificed his father's happiness, took the vow, terrible oath, of one, he'll always protect the throne, but he will never ascend it, and he'll become a Naishtika Brahmachari. He'll never get married or father children. But then what happens even later is that Satyavati's children, so she had Chitranga, who was killed by a Gandharva. So he was childless, so he had no heir to the throne. Then she had a Vichitravir, and he died of an illness, again without any children. And these princes then left behind wives. And so now Satyavati, the very person who is telling Bhishmadev, you can't take the throne, you can't have children, or your children will claim an heir to the throne. Now she's telling Bhishmadev, actually, now you should take the throne. And you should now, maybe you can marry these widows. and father children and like this. But Bhishma Dev, again, that would have been easy for him to do. He could have done that and no one would have really questioned him, but he's made this vow and he sticks to his vow and he avoids the temptation of going into Grihastha life. And instead he sticks to his vow. And so then, as we know, Vyasadeva is approached and from this, King Pandu, and then Maharaj Dhritarashtra is there, and obviously Vidur is there as well. So how does this relate to us? Well, it would have been easy for Bhishma Dev to break his vow at that point, but he didn't. So, and for us, it's easy sometimes to break our vows, or sometimes we may eat things and think, oh, one of the big principles of Krishna consciousness is prasadam, is that even if the food is vegetarian, it's said in the Bhagavad Gita, if it's not offered to the Lord, we only verily eat sin. But sometimes do we feel a bit lazy or think, oh, it's vegetarian, or just maybe quickly. I remember His Holiness Swam Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj was on Sankirtan, and so they're often traveling around and they bring some things with them to consume, and they had something which hadn't been offered, and so someone was saying, oh, I'm hungry, bring out the snacks. And Mars is saying, oh, at least let someone offer it first. And the guy said to him, just Sri Vishnu it. So a quick way of offering is just by saying Sri Vishnu 3 times. And then can we sometimes, that what's the point in offering in that way, without the devotion, so it's so much, as we know, that Yome Bhakti Aparachiti, the bhakti that we put into it is what is most important. Then sometimes, we may think, oh, I just want to get these rounds out of the way, or I'm not initiated yet. It'll be okay if I only chant a few rounds today, and then maybe I'll do catch up tomorrow, or I'll skip it. I'll chant 16 good rounds when I'm initiated, but for now, maybe I know some, we have our own standards. So I'm not saying, whatever standard you choose to practice, whatever vrat you choose to make, I think it's important to also know our level. And we've discussed this, that we're not trying to become pure devotees in one day, but whatever vow what we can make to Krishna, a vow is very, very empowering. So whatever level we're at, if we can choose to abstain from certain things due to our conditioning, we're all at different levels, but if we can choose to stick to a minimum vow, I'm going to read this much a day, I'm going to chant this much a day, I'm only going to stick to this. And if we can stick to that, with that comes a lot of empowerment to advance our Krishna consciousness. But then there's another subtle temptation here as well. And this is a subtle temptation within Krishna consciousness, is that we can think that we can get Krishna by what Prabhupada refers to as a mechanical process. So I was listening to some excerpts from Srila Prabhupada, and on one occasion, some of his followers, Prabhupada's followers, they would sometimes leave and come back, and they would explore different sampradayas. And one such disciple of Prabhupada, he'd actually been speaking to some Babajis in Vrindavan. And one of the Babajis had told him that you cannot go back to Godhead unless you chant 64 rounds a day. To which Prabhupada said, you cannot get Krishna by a mechanical process. What does this mean? Is we're applying material logic to a spiritual process. So if we think, okay, if I chant X number of rounds, if I have X amount of knowledge, if I've read Bhagavatam back to back and I know it all inside out, I know the Bhagavatam, I know all the shlokas, and some people can recite the entire Gita from memory. If I know all this mechanical things, then I'll achieve Krishna. This is also a subtle temptation. Because we're so materially conditioned, we apply our material thinking to a spiritual process. So it's important actually to remember that rather than, materially is the quantity. Often material success is defined by how much you have. In Krishna consciousness, it's very, very different. It's the quality. It's the quality of our character. It's the quality of our intention. It's the quality ultimately of our bhakti. So this is what we should be looking to refine. Yes, sometimes if we do more sadhana, this can aid this, but we can't be looking to buy Krishna with more rounds or more reading. And we only need to look at the wonderful example of the Brahmana, illiterate Brahmana with Lord Chaitanya. He could not even read the Bhagavad Gita. He was illiterate, but he was crying. And Lord Chaitanya approached him. Other Brahmins were making fun of him. But Lord Chaitanya knew that he understood the Gita within his heart. And he was crying because he could see how wonderful a devotee, how wonderfully Krishna treats his devotees. So this is also a subtle way. There's the gross ways, but very subtly we can apply material thinking to a spiritual process. And this is a temptation within Krishna consciousness. And so finally, the last point I wanted to discuss was death. We're talking about death and the passing of Bhishma Dev. D, connect to one's dharma. E, expect to be misunderstood as Vritrastora was, as Gorkishore Das Babaji was, and ultimately as Bhishma Dev was fighting on the side of the Kauravas. AT was avoid temptation externally and internally. And H stands for always remember that Krishna is within the heart. So Krishna can see, even if no one else is watching, and externally we may be giving the impression that we're some amazing devotee. Krishna is in the heart, so he can see everything. He knows everything that we are doing. And there's a nice quote which I read once, which was, the measure of a man or woman is how he treats those who can do him no good. So I often think about myself and think, how do I treat those close to me? How do I treat those who, in my mind, I think are junior to me? And, you know, so if a Maharaj comes to visit or a senior devotee, we're all bowing at their feet and we're offering them so much respect. But then behind closed doors, how are we treating the people around us? And Krishna sees all this, we may think, oh, I'm offering so much respect to my guru. I offer so much respect to devotees, but Krishna's in the heart of every living being. So he can see also how we're treating other people. And that's really where we can assess where we're at. Because it's easy in one sense to a guru and the etiquette is there. But then when we're there with those close to us, and do we worship things that give us lamentation? I heard this very nice point in a class, and I wanted to refer to a beautiful pastime much later in the Bhagavatam of there's an amazing pastime of the Avadut Brahmana, or also known as the Avanti Brahmana, and he describes on his travels he sees many different things in the world. He sees animals, he sees the trees, he sees skies, and each of these become his gurus. And he learns something about the world just by observing. And one such person one such thing that he observes is a prostitute by the name of Pingala. And this prostitute Pingala, she's waiting outside on the doorstep, waiting for a rich customer to come so she can entertain him. And she's thinking about this, and she's really just meditating on getting a lot of Lakshmi and hoping that someone rich will come and use her services. But then if she's in much anxiety about this, and then suddenly she gets an epiphany and becomes a lot calmer. And she says this beautiful verse in the Bhagavatam as she's becoming calm. She says, I am such a fool that I've given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. That most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my own heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I've ignorantly served insignificant men who can never satisfy my real desires and who have simply brought me unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. So I thought this was just such a beautiful verse and a nice way to kind of conclude on, is that even within Krishna consciousness, we can sometimes meditate on things that will give us lamentation, even if it's just within our mind. We can look for status, we can look for material status, whether it's in Krishna consciousness or outside. We can sometimes, do we still worship people? I know for myself, do we still look up to people who are very well materially situated? Or you have a big position in ISKCON, or even outside of ISKCON, and we think, oh, this person's got a lot of money, and so subtly we're aspiring for that then. And actually we're worshipping things which ultimately we know on a theoretical level that these things will give us lamentation. Just as Pingala realized that these things will just only ultimately bring us lamentation. And ultimately, if we can connect, remember that Krishna is always there in the heart, and connecting to him is what is really going to give us happiness. I'm going to end with just a really lovely prayer by, I suppose you could call her a devotee of sorts, a very saintly lady by the name of Mother Teresa. So we talked about this concept of dharma. We talked how we're ultimately going to be misunderstood by others. We need to avoid temptation and remember that Krishna is always in the heart. And on this concept of being misunderstood, as Bhishma Dev was, I'll just recite this. So people are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Antekala chame eva smaram mukta kalevaram ya priyati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayaha. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. And this is the destination, and this is what Bhishma Dev achieved upon leaving his body. So those are some thoughts that I have on this amazing devotee, Bhishma Dev. I'd like to thank you so much for your kind attention today. Please forgive me for any mistakes, and I'd welcome at this point any comments, any corrections or questions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. We will now not see death in any other way but the way you have explained it, by dharma, and expect to be misunderstood and avoid temptation, and Krishna is always in our heart. Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments? I think you have simplified this today so much that there are no questions or comments, probably. Guruji, just out of curiosity, I was thinking, I mean, I hadn't heard the story of the prostitute Pingla, but what changed her mind? Because she lived in the material world and she was expecting all material things, and suddenly, was she a devotee, or how was there a change in mind, or where was she coming from?
Yes, so Pingala the prostitute, she had struggled her whole life for money. So this wasn't just like, you know, a sudden kind of realization. But Prabhupada explains in the purport that she kind of, and actually throughout the Shastras, it's explained that eventually a person will become really dissatisfied with material life. And at that point, they'll come to Krishna. And so she had come to this point, at that point, very point in her life, she'd come to this realization. I think many people can relate. I definitely, at some point, it just, something just, we keep trying again and again to enjoy in various ways. And we just don't, you know, we don't either get the taste, we just become dissatisfied and we keep getting burnt. And actually in the Nectar of Devotion, there's a wonderful prayer also by a devotee who says that I've served my senses for so long, but they don't give me any respite. So now, and they actually just keep punishing me. So instead, I'm gonna, I wish to serve you now, Krishna. I wish to serve you now, my Lord. And so she just come to this realization after feeling, I think if you look at the way she was feeling so dejected and low. But upon that, there's a nice quote that rock bottom became the solid foundation upon which I built my life. And she's hit rock bottom, and suddenly she feels elated because she realizes that none of these things can give her happiness. So I think there's a backstory to Pingal the prostitute, but maybe we can explore that in another session as well.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I was just curious. And if it is possible to share your poetry, that would be really good as well.
Yes, Mati, I'll send you that.
Okay, since there are no more questions or comments or clarifications, I hand over to Path Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Kindly end the session, if possible.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Such a nice and wonderful class. You are describing many things about Pitama Bhishma and the temptation, lamentation, so many things. So Pitama Bhishma is such character. As much as we heard it, it seems it's new. We are listening just now, and it is increase your curiosity to know about more the Pitama Bhishma. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Already you simplified this text today. Also, I thanks all the devotees who joined here. I request all the devotees, please unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra. For glorification of His grace, Kamal, Panchal, Prabhuji, please join. Everyone, please.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhashcha, Kripa Sindhu Bheva, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you for the lovely class. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.